We're going to be talking about some questions today. Hence the title. We're going to be talking about some questions because we live in a time where you are getting bombarded with different ideas, different concepts. You are being told all kinds of different truths. And if you don't know what the truth is, then it's very easy to buy into it because it sounds really good. I was looking at some different Instagram accounts and different things like that people post and they share, and they'll make statements, and I go, wow, that statement sounds really good. And then I'll go to the person's page, and I'll read through their whole profile and go through their whole feed, and I'm like, oh, the rest of what they think is really messed up. The rest of what they think actually isn't biblical, but they made one statement that was biblical, one statement that goes along with what God says, and now I'm like, oh, this person's great. This person must really know the truth, and then I follow them, or you follow them, and all of a sudden, you believe them because you didn't know how to test the rest of what they said. And so we're going to be talking about questions. We're living in a time when you jump on YouTube, you jump on TikTok, you jump on Instagram, and you will see a post, you will see a video, and that person just makes sense. It's like, oh yeah, of course. I saw this one video, and this guy, this Catholic priest, he was talking about how Jesus made a racist statement, and then Jesus repented, and then he was sorry, and then he healed this lady's daughter. And I was like, did you just say Jesus repented? Because for Jesus to repent, it would mean that he made a mistake or that he sinned, but he's God and he's sinless, so he couldn't. But the statement that he made and the way he said it, he really seemed like he knew what he was talking about. And if you don't know what you're talking about or what you believe, you can get quickly deceived by things that sound good, but they aren't good. Turn to your neighbor and say, just because it glitters, don't mean it's gold. Just because it glitters, don't mean it's gold. Ladies, when he shows up with that 25-cent ring out of the thing, and he was like, I just paid for this, and he's like, that don't count. This does not count. I'm going to talk you through a series of questions, and my goal today is for you to walk away from here, maybe not having memorized all the answers, but at least going, okay, I know what I believe and why I believe it. I know what I believe and why I believe it. Because let me tell you, you are supposed to be light in the middle of darkness. But if you can't tell the difference between light and darkness, then you can't be that. If you walk into a situation and you can't tell what's right or what's wrong, what's good or what's bad, then you can't step into who God has called you to be, because you're going to always question it. And when somebody goes, wait, you believe this? And you're like, well, yeah. Why? What about this, this, and this? And you're like, oh, well, that's the way I was raised, and that's how my parents taught me. If your response and your answer to why you believe what you believe is because your parents taught you, I'm going to say, number one, good job, parents. And number two, it's time for you to get your own faith. It's time for you to know why you believe what you believe. So let's jump into this. It's time to lean in. It's time to focus, because if you don't, let me tell you what's going to happen. The enemy's going to come in, and he's going to be like, oh, get distracted. Oh, remember you were supposed to ask that person this question? Go ahead and text him that real quick. Go Snapchat him this real quick. Oh, go ahead. And he's going to distract you, and you are going to miss something that is going to help you. Let's lean in. Let's focus. Let's go. Father, I thank you that you have something amazing for your teens tonight. God, I thank you that you are in this room right now, that you are ready to give them revelation. Revelation is when the thing that we didn't see or didn't understand, all of a sudden we get it. We're going to have that moment like in math when he goes, oh, I get it now. I get how to use a participle in Jesus' name. You are going to get that moment today. Number one, let's start out with a basic question. This is a rhetorical question. I'm not asking you to answer this. But here's a question that we have to ask ourselves. Is there a God? Is there actually a God? Because we say there is. We come to church and we're like, oh, yeah, we believe in God and we worship God. But in the end, is there actually a God? Because guess what? It doesn't matter how much you believe something if it's not true. You got all these people out here sincerely believing their own truth, but if it's not true, then it doesn't matter. Is there a God? Well, let's think about a better question. How could there not be a God? How could there not be a God? There's this law, this scientific law, and a law means that it's been proved to the point where they go, yeah, this is for sure. And this law states this: matter cannot be created or destroyed. How many of you have ever heard this law before? Matter, yes, you've learned about that right now. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. I can take this chair and I can burn it to a crisp. But the matter that it is, even though it changes form, will not go away. It turns into smoke, it turns into ash, but I cannot make it ever go away. In the same way, I can't all of a sudden be sitting here and bink, oh, snap, there's a car there. Like, it won't happen. It can't happen. It's impossible for it to happen. That is a scientific law. So, if matter can't be created or destroyed, then it must mean that the fact that we have matter all around us means that something bigger, greater, and beyond what is natural made it happen. Does that make sense? If natural things can't just happen, then whatever made the thing happen must be supernatural, above what is natural. So there must be a powerful, if not all-powerful being that made it happen. There must be something that is not contained by time and space that can stand outside of it and make time and space. That makes sense? So then the question that we ask then is, well, then where did God come from? Right? That's what everybody likes to say. Well, then where did God come from? God, by definition, is self-existent. That means he doesn't have a beginning or an ending. He just is. And we don't like that. It makes us uncomfortable. How many guys, if I say that statement, it makes you like kind of weird on the inside. You're like, but how does it not, how can it just always have been? It does for me. I'm like, but it just, because everything we know has a beginning and an ending because we are a part of the natural world and that's the way it's created. But God is not a part of the natural world. He's outside of it, so he has the ability to not be contained by time. That makes sense? So God stands outside of it. God, in who he is self-existent. He just always was. So people try to get all smart. Well, then where did God come from? Well, if you were so smart, you would know that God doesn't have to come from anywhere. That's what makes him God. Now, the next question then would be, okay, so let's just say there is a God. Does that mean that Jesus is God? How do we know that the one we believe in is actually God? How do we know it's not some other one? How do we get to that point? Well, I would say we need to take a step back first and ask a different question. And that question would be, was Jesus real? Like, did Jesus actually exist? And sometimes there will be some ignoramus person who will come out of the woodworks and be like, well, people don't even know if Jesus actually existed. And I'll be like, well, you're ignorant. I won't say that to them because I love them and I want to be able to have a conversation with them. But in my mind, I'm saying, well, you don't know what you're talking about. Let me ask you guys this. How do we know that George Washington existed? First of all, let me ask you this. Who here has seen George Washington? You've seen him on a painting? Oh, good. Good. Who has seen George Washington walking around like Elvis at the gas station? Who? Anybody? George? No, none of us have seen George Washington, but who here would actually be like, I don't know if I believe in George Washington? Probably none of us. How do we know that George Washington existed? Lilia? There's records written of him. So wait a minute. You expect me to believe something that somebody 200 and something years ago wrote down? They're dead now. They wrote it down. You expect me just to believe, based off of the fact that they wrote it down, that George Washington is real? Just the fact that somebody painted a picture of George Washington, that means he's real? Oh. So if somebody writes it down for a historical record, then we take it as a historical record. So when Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John sat down and said, I'm going to write a historical record about this man called Jesus that I personally knew, and they wrote it down, why is it that all of a sudden people get super discriminating and they're like, well, we can't believe that because it was just from so long ago. But you'll believe the George Washington one that was written a long time ago, but because it was 200 years and not 2,000. Oh. They wrote it down. But let me tell you this. They weren't the only ones who wrote about Jesus. There was a dude, his name was Josephus. He was a Jewish historian, and he made this statement about Jesus. Now, this was in AD 37 AD, so this is probably, he was born in AD 37, so this was probably about 30 years after Jesus died, rose again, went up into heaven. So 30 years is not that long. Okay, I'm 35. It's not that long. Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, so Josephus is talking about this dude, and he says, about this time there lived Jesus, a wise man. He was one who did surprising feats and was a teacher of such people as accept truth gladly. Pilate condemned him to be crucified. So this guy Josephus, he's not a Christian. He has no reason to say anything about Jesus that's beneficial or helpful. He's just talking about things that happened during that time. And he's writing down, hey, there was this group of people. They were called Christians. And they came from this guy, Jesus, who was a wise man. And he got crucified by Pilate, which is surprisingly the same thing that the people in the gospel said. Then there's this other guy. His name is Tacitus. He was a Roman historian. And he said this, Nero, you guys know the guy Nero, and he like burned down Rome and all that kind of stuff. He was kind of a crazy dude. Okay. Nero fastened guilt and inflicted the most exquisite torture on a class hated called Christians. Christus, who is Jesus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered at the hands of Pontius Pilate. So they're talking about Jesus, and he's explaining where these people got their name from. The Christians got their name from Jesus the Christ. Now, if Jesus didn't exist in history, then there would be no such thing as Christians. Okay? Because they had to get their name from a person who actually existed. The apostles, the 12 people that were following Jesus, the main guys, in order to fake this, they would have to tell people that there was a man who never existed, named Jesus, that did miracles to people that never existed, to people who knew for a fact that Jesus was never running around. It'd be like if I was walking around in our staff meeting, in our team meeting at church, and I was like, hey guys, remember Pastor Donahue? And they're like, who's that? Yeah, Pastor Donahue. He was one of the greatest pastors that we've had at this church. He was awesome. I loved him, man. He was so cool. And everybody on the pastoral team would be like, Josh, there's nobody named Pastor Donahue. That would be the equivalent of what the disciples would have to do. Just make up this dude, Jesus the Christ, and be like, he did all these miracles. And they're like, we never even saw this dude. Oh, yeah, but we're going to start a whole religion, and we're going to start this thing about this guy Jesus who never existed, and you might be able to trick a couple of people, but you're not going to be able to trick millions of people into thinking that this guy who never existed is the person you follow. Now, the other thing that we know about George Washington is that we know the effects of what he did. He fought a war. He won a war, and now we have the freedom, we have America, we have what we have now, right? Exactly. We have the effects of what George Washington did. What does AD stand for? It does not stand for after death. Yes. Anno Domini, which means the year of our Lord. They are referring to Jesus. Now, I realize that you could say that they made it all up, but let me tell you, the disciples wouldn't have the ability to make up a fake person to the point where it changes the whole way that history is written. Okay? At some point, somebody's going to stand up and be like, this wasn't a real dude. And people would go, oh yeah, why we name it after him? This wasn't a real guy. Anno Domini was based off a real person, Jesus. Besides the gospel, we have historians who wrote about him. So let's just say, okay, all right. So Jesus was a real dude. I get it. But was he God? Was Jesus God? Because this is where we start to get down to it. Because when you start telling people that Jesus is the way to heaven, and they go, no, there's lots of ways to heaven, and you say, no, Jesus is the only way to heaven, you better know why Jesus is the only way to heaven. Did Jesus think that he was God? That's a good question. Did Jesus think that he was God? Let's look at a statement that Jesus said in John 10, 29 through 33. This is Jesus. He said, for my Father has given them to me. He's more powerful than anyone else. No one can snatch them from my Father's hand. Next verse. The Father, watch this. Jesus says, the Father and I are one. Okay? We're of the same substance. We are of the same thing. And then watch what happens. Once again, the people picked up stones to kill him. They're like, boy, okay, we're about to kill you now. You're gone too far. We was cool when you were healing people. We were cool when you were raising people from the dead. We were cool when you were casting out demons out of people. But now you're done gone messed up, and I'm about to throw a rock at your big old head, and I'm going to kill you. Why? Jesus said, at my Father's direction, I've done many good works. Why are you about to stone me for one of those? And they said this, we're stoning you not for any good work, for blasphemy. A mere man claims to be God. Jesus knew for a fact what he was saying. He knew exactly what was going to happen. When he said, me and the Father are one, we're of the same substance, we're of the same thing, he knew that they were going to equate him being with the Father as one, as him claiming to be God. So when somebody comes up to you and says, Jesus never even said he was God, you can go, again, ignorant. Okay, don't say that to him. I'm just kidding. It's just a me thing. They don't know. Jesus did this many times. Now, anybody can claim to be God, right? I could do it right now. I can claim to be God right now. But the question is, can you prove it? So Jesus first starts out, he's like, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn some water into wine. Badow. All right, just warming up. Then he starts healing some people. Split, splat, splow, right? He's just like, yeah, just trying to show you. Just trying to give you a little something. Get you a little something. Then he started raising people from the dead. Smickety smack, right? He's just like, oh, just trying to show you guys who I am. He starts casting demons out of people. Whack, 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 right? He's just like, yeah, get on out. Go on some pigs. So he's doing all this stuff. He's showing them, look, this is who I am. This is who I am. And then he does the big move. Matthew 20:18. Listen, he said, we're going up to Jerusalem where the Son of Man, he's talking about himself. Listen to me. Only Jesus can talk about himself in third person and get away with it, okay? He says, the Son of Man will be betrayed to the leading priests and the teachers of the law. They will sentence him to die. Then they will hand him over to the Romans to be mocked, flogged with a whip, and crucified. But on the third day, he will be raised from the dead. On the third day, he'll be raised from the dead. Jesus is making a statement. He's like, listen, up until now, I've just been giving you little hints, little clues, trying to tell you who I am. But I'm about to prove it to you. It would be one thing if Jesus died And he's on the cross. And he's like, listen, guys, didn't know this was going to happen. My bad. I really thought we were going somewhere. Really thought we were going to take this thing all the way. And then he dies. And he goes in the tomb. And the Father's like, hey, man, it's cool. You can get up, Jesus. Like, you can come. And Jesus gets up. He's like, oh, I didn't even know I was going to get. This is amazing. Thank you. I'm back. Hey, guys. Like, that's not what happened. Jesus walks up to him and he says, listen, here's what's going to happen. The Romans, they're going to whip me. They're going to crucify me. I'm going to be dead for 3 days, but I'm going to come back to life. So what happens? Acts chapter 10, 39 and 40. It says this is Peter talking. He says, we apostles are witnesses of all he did. Peter's saying this. We actually saw this. This isn't something somebody told us. We saw it. They put him to death by hanging him on a cross. But God raised him to life on the third day. Then God allowed him to appear. And he talks about how he appeared to all these people. Peter is telling them, Jesus rose from the dead just like he said he was going to do. Now, if Jesus rose from the dead like he said he was going to, then his claim to be God is now proven by his sign of resurrection. That makes sense? Now, you'll get these people, and they'll say something like this. Listen, I know Jesus was a real guy, and he taught some really great stuff. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's good stuff. Jesus taught some really great stuff. Do good to people that hurt you. Like, that's just next level teaching right there. He was just, man. But, he wasn't God. He was just a good teacher. Well, here's the problem with that. Is that Jesus did claim to be God. So if Jesus was a good teacher, but he was claiming to be God, either Jesus was lying when he claimed to be God, which would disqualify him from being a good teacher, or he was crazy, because if somebody walks up to you and they're like, listen, I'm God, I'm going to just tell you, they're probably crazy. Just take a step back, okay? Put your hand on your wallet and just walk off. Or he was God. Those are the only things that are really left. He was either a liar, he was crazy, or he was God. That's all the options we have with Jesus. He doesn't get to be a good teacher because he claimed to be God. So if he rose from the dead, then he's who he says he is. And if he didn't rise from the dead, he's not who he says he is, and we are sitting in this building for no reason. Everything that we believe is riding on the facts that Jesus rose from the dead. Not the belief, the facts that he rose from the dead. So then the question then becomes, preguntas. The question then becomes, did Jesus rise from the dead? I'm going to give you two things. There's so many different things that you can look into and read about to see why we believe that Jesus rose from the dead, but I don't have time to tell them all to you, so I'm going to give you two of them. Ready? Number one, you have the followers of Jesus, the disciples. What you have to know about them is that they were not here with a mindset that they were going to bring peace to the world, okay? The disciples were like ready to fight somebody. The disciples were being oppressed by the Romans. The Jewish people were oppressed by the Romans, and their belief was that when the Messiah, the Christ, Jesus showed up, he was going to help them fight the Romans, and they were going to win back their freedom. So they weren't just sitting there, and they're like, oh, Jesus, we just wanted to learn how to pray better and just be good. Like, that's not what they were thinking. They were like, Jesus, listen, just give us the word. We'll just start killing every Roman we see. We're ready for this. And Jesus is like, okay, just go feed those people some bread and fish. Okay, calm down. And they're like, all right, we're going to feed them. Then they'll be part of our army. Then we'll start killing some Romans. He's like, no, calm down. Okay, this girl's dead. I'm going to go raise her back to life. Just chill here. Don't do anything. Don't touch that knife, Peter. Okay. So they had in their head that Jesus was going to bring a revolution. So when Jesus dies on the cross, their mindset is this: it's over. The revolution is over. And do you know what happens when people try to revolt against Rome? They get killed. Okay? They get crucified just like Jesus got crucified. You guys know the story about Peter denying Jesus? The reason he denied Jesus was because he was afraid that if he found out that he was a part of Jesus' squad, they would kill him too. It wasn't like he was just like, oh man, that's my best friend, but not right now because I'm embarrassed. No, he was scared of dying. So after Jesus died and is in the ground, there's two things that they would do. Number one, they needed food, so they would fish. And number two, they would hide. They would hide because they were afraid of getting caught. They were afraid of being killed. And they hid in a room. And then one day, this lady runs in, Mary Magdalene, and she goes, guys, Jesus is alive. And they're like, what are you talking about? They're like, no, you don't understand. Jesus, he's alive. And so Peter and John, they run to the tomb where Jesus is because guess what? Everybody knows where Jesus got buried. It wasn't a secret. Everybody knows where Jesus got buried because they put guards in front of the tomb because they knew Jesus said he would come back to life. And so the Pharisees, the people who actually put Jesus to death, they said, listen, we don't want the disciples to come and steal his body and say he rose again. So we need you, Pilate, to put some soldiers in front of this tomb so they don't come and steal his body. So he puts about 100 soldiers in front of the tomb. The angel comes and breaks Jesus out. The soldiers run off, and Jesus comes back to life. When Peter and John get to the tomb, they look inside, and Jesus is gone. They go back. They're fishing. Jesus is like, hey, Peter, come here, bro. So Peter rows back to shore, and him and Jesus start eating fish sandwiches for breakfast. I know it's disgusting. I would have picked something else like Chick-fil-A, but anyway, all they had was Long John Silver's. And so they're sitting there, and they're eating, and Jesus starts talking to him. He's real. And then Jesus says, listen, I want you to go into Jerusalem. I want you to wait. And the gift of the Father is going to come. And they sit in that room, and the Holy Spirit comes and falls on them. And they are given power. And they go out and begin to preach. But what do they preach? They preach that Jesus is the Christ and that he rose from the dead. That's what they preach. That Jesus is the Christ and he rose from the dead. Now, here's the deal. Exactly. Most of these people die. Now, if you ever heard of a guy, this guy's name is L. Ron Hubbard. Anybody ever heard of him? He started the Church of Scientology. Anybody? No? All right. Well, did I put that quote in there? I don't think I did. Here's what L. Ron Hubbard says. You don't get rich writing science fiction. If you want to get rich, you start a religion. The guy who started Scientology said, if you want to get rich, start a religion. All right? That's today. That was like in the 40s. 1940s in America where you could do that. In their day, starting a religion got you dead. In their day, they weren't getting rich. In their day, they weren't like, hey, guys, come follow this dead guy, Jesus. He came back to life. No, you can't see him. Come follow him. By the way, you got to give us some money to get in. We're going to get rich, guys. Let's say this thing. Even though he didn't actually rise from the dead. We're just going to make this thing up. People are going to follow us. We're going to get rich. That's not what happened. They got killed. James, the brother of Jesus, got thrown off the top of a roof. His legs got broken. And then they came and stabbed him and killed him that way. Okay? I believe it was Thomas that was in India, and he's telling the people of India about Jesus, and they tie horses to his arms and legs and have him go opposite directions, and that's how he dies. You have John who didn't die, but they boil him in oil trying to kill him, but he doesn't die. You have Peter who they were going to crucify like Jesus, but he says, I'm not worthy to die like my Lord. So he tells them to crucify him upside down. So they do. These people are not over here trying to get rich. They're not trying to start a religion. They saw Jesus rise from the dead, and they couldn't do anything but preach that Jesus is God. He rose from the dead, and I'm willing to die for it because I saw it myself. You can clap for that because this isn't about me. This is about Jesus rising from the dead. When my kids don't want to eat their dinner, sometimes they'll say something like this: Dad, my stomach hurts. And then I'll say something like this: okay, but if your stomach hurts, you shouldn't get any dessert. And they'll go, oh, wait, I'm feeling better. Oh, look, I'm better now. Because they knew that what they said wasn't true. When there was a consequence, they went back on what they said. If the disciples knew that what they were saying wasn't true, when it came time to die, they'd be like, I'm just kidding. Jesus didn't come back to life. Nobody does that. What do you guys think? I was just kidding the whole time. Joke's on you. Impractical jokers. But that's not what they did. The change in the apostles from afraid to bold is proof that they actually saw what they said they saw. Here's the second thing, and this is my favorite one. Like I said before, Jesus was killed by a group of people called the Pharisees. They knew Jesus predicted his death and resurrection. They knew the tomb that he was buried in. So in Matthew 27:64, watch what happens. So we request, this is the Pharisees, they're talking to Pilate. They said, we request you seal the tomb until the third day, because that's when Jesus said he would rise. This will prevent his disciples from coming and stealing his body. Then tell everyone he raised from the dead. If that happens, we'll be worse off than we were at first. Jesus rises from the dead. They told the soldiers, you must say Jesus' disciples came during the night while we were sleeping, and they stole his body. So they tell the soldiers that were guarding the tomb, we need you to tell people the body got stolen. Listen, I know it's going to make you look bad. I know you could get some consequence. You might even get killed for it, but I need you to tell people that his body got stolen. Here's the big question. If they knew Jesus didn't rise from the dead, and they knew that they didn't steal his body, why did they not march over to the tomb, roll away the stone, look in there and say, look, it's the body of Jesus. Case closed. The greatest proof that Jesus rose from the dead was that nobody could go and point to the body of Jesus that was still dead and say, look, he's actually dead. Because if they did, the whole thing stops there. But because they couldn't, it is proof that Jesus rose from the dead. And you would say, but what if the disciples did steal it? Then we go back to the fact that if they did steal it and they tell people he rose, but they know he didn't, and you're about to get your arms and legs pulled off, you start going, wait, I'm just kidding. His body's right back here. Let me show you. The disciples were willing to die for what they knew to be true. People will die for what they believe, even if it's a lie. You know that? People will die. Suicide bombers. People will die for what they believe to be true. But people will rarely ever die for what they know to be a lie. Does that make sense? The disciples didn't have a belief system. They weren't like, oh, somebody told me about Jesus. No, they saw Jesus. So they were willing to die. Now, if Jesus claimed to be God and then proved it by predicting his death and resurrection and then rising from the dead, then Jesus is who he says he is. Jesus is God. And if Jesus is God, then he is what we base our life off of, because he is the one who said that he and the Father created everything. That means that what he says and the way he created it is the way we're supposed to live life. That means that when in John 14:6, when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one can come to the Father except through me, Jesus isn't sitting there going, haha, just kidding, guys. No, he's telling them the truth. I'm it. I am God. I'm the way. I am the truth. Not your separate truth, not your truth is your truth and my, no. I am truth. And you can stand firm on who he is.